All right, so this is gonna, please pay attention. This is gonna be the second of my last lecture. So this is really important because I'm not gonna be in here lecturing anymore. You're gonna be teaching for the remainder of the course after spring break. So today really matters and next week really matters as far as understanding your assignments, understanding expectations, understanding teaching practicum, and then also doing a really good job at that by hopefully writing some notes down today that helps you teach your lesson plan with your partner, okay? So you have gotten a number. If you don't have a number and you are watching this at a later time, email me and we'll get you your number placement for class. You have this link here. Okay, so if you click back, this is called lesson and unit planning links. So we're going to talk about lesson planning and unit planning today. Your lesson planning template right now, if you have your computer, I would go ahead and download this file or open this file and try to start filling out some notes in your lesson plan. Okay, the more you do today, the easier it's going to be when you finalize your lesson plan. So if you can open that up, or if you're just writing notes, just write, lesson title, unit title, and just write some notes. You don't have to fill in your whole lesson plan today. Okay. First thing on the syllabus today was to go over lesson plan recipes. So this is just an example of how I might teach a power yoga class. Okay. I might introduce students to what they will be learning. It might be 3 minutes of introduction. I might tell people about the modifications. I might ask people if they have any specific areas of pain. I might ask the group if they've ever taken a yoga class before. So this is really important because you're going into this thinking, you might be teaching students who have never practiced yoga or maybe your type of yoga before. So maybe getting maybe some understanding before you start, telling them maybe a little bit about your background, where you're coming from, why you chose yoga, or what's your passion behind what you're teaching. So let us know what and why you're doing what you're doing. Okay, so you're going to introduce students to what they will be learning. And then always, in my opinion, think beginning with breathing and meditation for maybe 0 to 5 minutes, could be a couple minutes. But if you're teaching a yoga class, I would always recommend starting with breathing because we always want to focus on our breathing even throughout each stretch. And really, the more we focus on our breathing, the less we're thinking about distractions. The more we can be in tune with ourselves, the more balance we can have, more control we have, the lower anxiety we're going to have. So breathing is really a medication for just awareness and also just fundamental just movement skills, because in yoga you're trying to move throughout each pose and then also breathe into each position. So passive, static, and dynamic stretching. So that could be something like child pose, cat and cow. That could be some just easy static positions to get into just to see where your students are at. Then get into some dynamic stretching like sun salutations, A and B. Okay, maybe doing a little bit of stuff in between the sun salutations. Then going into some motor control or dynamic stretching or active stretching. So thinking about maybe getting into positions and thinking about some active stretches, or thinking about having them really focus on motor control or something that is core related, right? 5, I have isometric, PMF, and core training or core strength. So I might add in some hollow holds or like boat pose, getting them maybe in the plank position, side plank position, because I'm really trying, as a power yoga teacher or hatha yoga teacher, I'm thinking, how can I also give them a workout as well, full body workout? So front planks, side planks, your warrior threes would be a good challenge. Any type of advanced postures would probably go into this core strength. And then static stretching, active mobility training for 10 minutes before you end, to really just sink into the stretches. And after you've done the hard stuff, then it's like, all right, now I'm going to cool down with some passive or static stretches. Okay, and then you have passive stretching at 8, relaxation stretches, and then ending with breathing or meditation. So that might be a way I would break down my power yoga class. If you're teaching a relaxation yoga class, it's obviously going to be a lot different. If you're teaching any other type of yoga that you're most familiar with, it could be a little bit different, but that's just one example. If you're teaching sports, introduce student learning outcomes, what you want them to understand and learn at the end of by the end of the lesson. Begin with static stretching and motor control exercises like we do before our workouts. Dynamic warm-up and power exercises, probably some hopping, jumping, dynamic warm-ups, knee pulls and stuff like that, getting them really activated. And then going through some individual sport learning, partners sport skill assessment / learning, and some group game or group or game related to that sport, followed by a closure and stretch assessment of class student learning outcomes. So basically, you're going through the same progression as our warm-ups in the gym, and then you're going into individual sport learning, partner sport skills or assessment, and then going into some group or game related to the sport. Does anyone plan on teaching a sport? Are you thinking about it? What sport are you thinking about? Okay, so let's just say we're teaching basketball, for example. We want to get warmed up. Obviously, it's really important to warm up for basketball because they're going to be doing a lot of jumping. They're going to be doing a lot of moving and sprinting. And if you're not warmed up to sprint, then you can totally get injured. And so it's really important, even before a basketball game, to warm up. You watch football players, they warm up, they stretch, they dynamic stretch. You see them all the time just sitting in the squat position, abducting one leg, getting their adductors. So all the joints that you think you need to hit in that moment or in those 10 minutes, individual sport skill learning. So if it's basketball, everyone has a ball and everyone has their own attempts at dribbling the ball, dribbling in space. Maybe it's focusing on pivoting. Maybe it's focusing on dribbling at low patterns, middle patterns, high patterns. Maybe it's just bringing the ball around the waist. So then you go into partners or sports skill assessment. Maybe you're having two partners get together and they're passing it. And maybe you're seeing how many passes can they get in a row without dropping the ball. Or maybe you're seeing if they can see how many baskets they can get out of 10 trials. And so that's what I mean by assessment or learning, where you have one student who's assessing another student, how accurate they are at shooting, or how many passes can you get in a row without losing ball control. So that could be an assessment for soccer. Or even if you're doing throwing skills, how many times can you throw and catch it without dropping the ball? Group game or game related to the sport. So if it was basketball, maybe it's just 2v2s or 3v3s using all the nets. We have 6 nets. So you can have 3v3 games. And then obviously before the game, you want to really review the rules. And that's why talking about the rules during individual sport learning is probably important. And then during partner sports skills, talking about like offense, defense, you can do offense, defense strategies before you get into your game. So if you are teaching sport, just a progressive approach, not just, hey, let's just play basketball, everyone get the ball, like the old days where phys ed teachers would just roll out the ball and everyone just play basketball, right? And only the best players would get to play. So this ensures that all your students at least get an awesome 30-minute workout, right? Because your first 30 minutes is preparing the body for movement. Same thing in the yoga class. You're like slowly preparing for harder positions and poses. Okay, same thing with strength training. You don't just go into power training right away. You have to slowly progress there. And then once you get there, your body's primed to move. So that's why jumping, throwing, sprinting, those things are really important for the body because they exert the most force. Functional strength training. So this is an example I might have. Where I have introduced students to what they will be doing, go over guide, foam roll, mobility stretch, activation motor control, dynamic warm-up, power, strength, and then conditioning. So this is exactly what we did the other day in the gym. So we foam rolled, we prepared the tissue, we did a little bit of mobility and stretching, a little bit of active control and activation motor control. We went into our dynamic warm-up. We did some power, or we didn't get into power, but we did do power in our own individual way. So we didn't get into groups, but we did do that. got into strength, so you did lower, upper, and core or corrective exercises. So that's what those stretches were. So it's 1A, 1B, 1C. So it's basically a recipe for 3 different ways of teaching, either functional strength, sport ed, or yoga. I understand that many of you already have recipes and you already have certain ways you like to teach, and that is totally fine. And I'm glad to see that you're able to create your own recipes. But if you've never created a lesson plan before, these are just some suggestions. Okay, so don't think this is exactly what you have to do. I just wouldn't start. I just wouldn't start power first, or I wouldn't start my strength before my foam rolling. Okay, so these are just kind of in order of what I think might be the safest way to go through a lesson. All right. So looking at these links, what do all these links mean? So one, you got your placements for your practicum. We talked about lesson plan recipes. Now we're going to talk about the national standards using the links above. Okay. So when you look at your lesson plan template, you're going to first go through all of the above items, which are pretty self-explanatory. But you have your name, okay, the date you're going to be teaching, the date in blank, the day that you're going to teach, and the week of what. So let's just say this was the second week of a 4-week unit. You know, it might be a little bit different. Lesson title, what do you plan on calling your lesson? Is it going to be relaxation yoga? Is it going to be called, you know, breathing and meditation? Could it be yoga teacher training day 1? So if you're a yoga teacher and you've taught yoga classes, then maybe the next step is for you to plan a lesson on yoga teacher training methods as opposed to just teaching a yoga class. Now, yes, that's going to be a little bit harder, but if you've already taught yoga classes and planned yoga classes, then the next step is to be able to program yoga teacher training programs, right? Because maybe you could have your own certification or be a part of a certification one day. Because I know many studios provide their own certification. So Tamal Dodge, anybody know Tamal Dodge from Moe Consult? So I got my certification from him, from the Tamal Dodge yoga school. So I know that they also create certification classes on their retreats, okay? So we have our central focus, or our unit title. So whatever the unit title may be, maybe it's yoga teacher training day 1, or yoga teacher training, and then the lesson plan title could be yoga teacher training day 1, okay? Grade level in class, so do you want to teach it to college students, adults, older adults? What is the population? If you want to teach adaptive PE or physical education to elementary age students, you can do that as well, right? Central focus and content area. So what's the central focus? Maybe it's flexibility, maybe it's core strength, maybe it's all of the above, maybe it's strength, endurance, maybe you're focusing on maybe the respiratory system and you really want to go over, you know, what nostril breathing is. So where do you want to kind of centrally focus your content? Okay, overview of the lesson. So going over a quick overview of what you would teach. Okay, academic language. Academic language is going to be any type of words or actually, let me just go here real quick. Any type of words that you think are important for your lesson. So expiration, inhalation, maybe it's just the words of the postures that you're going to be using that day. Maybe it's sun salutation. Maybe it's you know, like if you're doing a bogey or, you know, something that is very in tune with golf or basketball. Maybe it's dribbling, maybe it's passing, okay? The lesson plan key template is going to go over all everything that I'm kind of going over now, okay? So as you're going through your guide, if you have any questions about what to add in your template, you just press the key, okay? So the key is available for you to use while you're going over your lesson plan. And so I might as well go over that as well. So the academic language can be related to vocabulary words, like I said, related to the focus of the lesson. Could be how words are formed, could be discourse or debate topics, or it could be any type of words and how they're used. Equipment and resources needed, so list all the materials and resources you and students will need to complete this lesson. So yoga mats, yoga blocks, is it basketballs, cones, is there jerseys involved if you're using teams? Are you using the radio? Are you going to be using kettlebells, resistant bands, anything that you're going to be using as far as equipment goes? Safety considerations, so anything you need to consider in the facility or gym that could be a safety hazard. Sources of the lesson, so explain how much of the lesson you create along with any sources that you use for any parts of the lesson. Be extremely specific. It's okay to borrow ideas, just give credit to where you're getting your ideas from. So if you're getting all your sources from your yoga teacher manual, then that's what you'll put. If you're getting all your sources from this, you took a class that was related to soccer and you take them from those sources, that's totally fine. National standards and state objectives. So I even have this in here as well. What you're going to do is you're going to pick a national standard that is associated with your lesson plan. Okay, we've talked about the standards in class. You're going to copy and paste whatever standard applies to your lesson plan. Okay, to go further in depth, you can add the objectives, but I won't make you do that for this specific lesson plan. You will, though, have to create some state learning objectives, okay, or find some objectives from the state that fit your lesson plan. Okay, so what you would do is you would copy and paste a any type of objective and essential standards that correlates best with your lesson plan. When you're looking at this, there's different types. There's motor skills, movement concepts, health-related fitness, personal social responsibility. The markers on the left, the K means kindergarten, the 1 means first, the second means second grade. You'll probably want to find learning outcomes for anything above probably 8th and 9th or 7th grade. So you're going to be able to find some different objectives that are related to your lesson plan using the state objectives. Okay, so you're going to just correlate or add learning objectives from the state and the national level. You're just going to copy and paste those in here. Okay, student learning outcomes. Remember, we talked about cognitive, affective, and psychomotor objectives or outcomes. So what do you want them to know by the end of the lesson? So at the end of the lesson, I want them to be able to list, right? Remember, we looked at all those words that involve cognitive domain: listing, discussing, explain. It could be match. Okay, they could use a paper. They have to match the pose with the name of the pose, right? So any type of thinking that you can have them do. Maybe it's just a question, like I list 3 stretches that focus on your hips today. Okay. For affective, okay, we talked about affective. What are some affective examples? Anybody remember? Sid, do you remember any affective examples? So like more personal social responsibility, the way people interact with each other, etiquette, treating the equipment with respect, treating others with respect, showing value for what you're participating in, asking people if they value what they did, or asking people's opinion on what they're doing. Okay. We have psychomotor skills, so any physical aspect of learning that addresses movement, motion, reflexes, coordination. Okay, that's going to be all the physical skills that you're teaching. So they're going to be performing resistant band rows. They're going to be performing a dynamic stretches. You don't have to list all the stretches or all the strength exercise, but you need to let us know maybe a couple of those things that you plan on teaching. Okay, you can say we're going to warm up to some mobility and stretching exercise, followed by listing out the specific maybe strength exercises that you're going to do in your strength training. Or maybe you're going to talk about the specific skills you're going to learn, like dribbling or throwing or passing or shooting. Or maybe you're going to tell us about the specific yoga postures that we're going to be learning in this class. Modifications, so any modifications that accommodate overachievers, beginners, and students with special needs. Okay, instructional strategies and the explanations are adjusted based on individual differences and needs. Okay, so like using the wall for support, using yoga blocks for people so they have better balance. So what type of modifications can you give people that may need extra supports? Okay, so in a yoga studio, they use, what are those cushions called? Bolsters. Yeah, they use those for support systems, right? When they get into really passive and relaxation yoga classes, they use all those like yoga blocks and those all the the bolsters, and they kind of get you all comfy. They use the blankets, so that's what we're talking about. Differentiation, so alterations to the lesson that accommodate auditory, linguistic, kinesthetic, and visual learners. So one, you should probably use the whiteboard. You'll have the whiteboard available. You should write your schedule of what you're going to be doing on the whiteboard. Okay, that would be a way to differentiate your lesson. Linguistic, okay, maybe having words maybe above you, or having some symbols or some type of maybe some past presentation skills. Okay, kinesthetic, so any type of maybe modeling that you're going to be doing. So maybe you have one person showing us the poses while one person is walking around. Okay, using auditory or using your verbal cues. And then visual learners. Okay, is there any pictures that you can use, or is there anything that you can help with visually? So when I gave you those packets, right, last week or on Monday, you had pictures of the exercises. So that would be visuals, right? Kinesthetic, well, basically kinesthetic is what we're moving around. So that was the actual stations. Linguistic, we had a whiteboard, but I'm not sure everyone saw the diagram of the whiteboard. And then auditory, we had music involved. Okay, so that's the way you can differentiate your lesson. Learning cues, terms or senses that reinforce skill sets involved in the game or activity. So if it's a jump, you're going to explode off the ground, or you're going to bend your knees and then swing your arms up as you jump. So those would be some internal, external, and then analogies. So think about analogies and cues that can get your learner to do what you want them to do. A good coach or teacher will give a cue and then ask the individual, did that cue work? Did that help you get to where you wanted to go? And they're like, no, I didn't get there, or you view it and it didn't work. Maybe it was the cue that kind of limited their ability. So your cues can make a difference. The way you say something can make a difference. I could say flex my hip, or I could say raise my knee toward the sky. And I might get half of the people, if I say flex your hip and close your eyes so you're not seeing anyone else do it, they might go like this. They might go like this, right? So if I say bring your knee up, that's just an external cue. Internal cue, you flex your hip, okay? Or I could say pretend there's a string from the sky pulling your knee up toward the ceiling. That would be an analogy. So internal, external, analogy. Analogies trump them all, okay? Because then when you get visual imagination going, people are like, oh, I get it. It's like kind of going up nice and slow all the way up toward the sky, okay? So use those cues. And then in this box, you're writing kind of the biggest cues that you're going to be using. The most important cues that you can describe are going to be in this box, okay? Lesson plan procedure. So it's going to be 60 minutes. You have the first 15 minutes to gather your things, to get ready for class. You can come early. So we have access to the gym at 11 o'clock, but you can get there at 10:30, start setting up if you need to, get your notes together, do whatever you need to do to get ready in the gym. And then we'll start probably at 11:15. So you'll have a 60-minute lesson. That should also include a closure. So some type of 3 to 5 minute activity that kind of maybe goes over what you did, or maybe it's a cool down activity that kind of relaxes us a little bit. So we're not just ending abruptly. Okay. So the description of activity, what will the teacher say? So I want to know kind of what you will say step by step. Use numbers or bullet points, what you will cover in the lesson, how long will the activity last, how many reps, how many sets, every minute should be accounted for. So the time will go in this left column here. Be more specific than just saying I'm delivering a lecture or stretch. We're going to just stretch out. The pace of the instructed activities keeps the students engaged. All students are challenged by the lesson, and the transition from one activity to another is smooth and relevant. Students are not confused and time is not wasted. Necessary adaptation of lesson plan occurs with little frustration. Okay, include your topic and lecture notes as additional instructional material. So if you have notes or things that you need in front of you that help you teach, use them, okay? Include your cues, differentiation, and modification. So I also want you to include differentiation and modifications if it's used in that particular area of the lesson plan. So if you're not using music in your introduction, but you're using music, or if you're using a visual in some part of your lesson, make sure that you add that. If there are cues specific to a skill, add the cues to that skill. Then you have an assessment of task or learning outcomes. So for each outcome, you should be able to identify or have one assessment for each, the cognitive, affective, and psychomotor, okay? You're gonna identify the specific standards or learning objectives measured by the assessment that you choose for analysis, provide the evaluation criteria such as a rubric, skill, or game performance, assessment, instrument, rating scale, you use to analyze student learning. So provide document at bottom of page. Now what we're gonna do now is look at a example lesson plan that I created for you all. Okay, so this was Monday, or this was our first lesson in the gym: self-myofascial release, respiration, and stretching. Okay, unit title: functional strength training, grade level college adult. Central focus: the main focus is to teach students more exercise to prepare for dynamic stretching, power, and strength and conditioning. This class will focus on the beginning portion of functional training workouts, which include foam rolling, breathing exercises, and stretching exercises. Overview: talk about the beginning of class all the way to the end. Academic language: self-myofascial release, diaphragmatic breathing, passive active dynamic stretching, scanning for tension. Okay, equipment: 30 yoga mats, 30 foam rollers, 30 tennis balls, yoga blocks for support, music player if needed during stretching, projector if needed for presentation of slides, wall space available. Okay, safety considerations: individuals with recent bone or joint issues should refrain from pressing into those body parts or negate them altogether. Sources of my lesson: so I got all this information from mbsc.tv. Also got it from the Certified Functional Strength Coach certification website, which I'm a part of. And then that's my document I have on flexibility. So if you can provide the links for your sources, that's also an add. Here's the national standards that I hit. Okay, I have standard 1, and then I found an objective that I'm not asking you to do, but if you want to go above and beyond, you can find objectives related to each standard. But I did meet 4 of the 5 standards, and I met objectives for each of those 4 standards. For the state PE objectives, I found about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 that fit with my lesson. So example: understands concepts, principles, strategies, and tactics that apply to the learning and performance of movement. So they're very general. So it's not going to be hard to find these objectives and standards. You're just aligning your lesson with standards so you can explain to somebody, yes, this lesson plan is standardized. Okay. Student learning outcomes. So I want the students to be able to describe the benefits of nostril breathing, self-myofascial release, and stretching. Students will be able to list at least 3 types of stretches. Students will be able to describe how the diaphragm moves. So we talked all about that in the lesson. Affective: students will participate in obtaining their own equipment and putting the equipment back. So that was for you. That was included in the lesson. Okay. Students will do their best at listening in the loud gym. So I know it's really hard to hear in there. So it's really important for people to listen up. Students will be asked questions if they have any. Students will be asked their opinion of the value of the self-myofascial release, and students will attempt to stay positive and show each other respect. Psychomotor: students will be able to perform a variety of self-myofascial release, breathing, and stretching techniques. I'm kind of listing everything that we're doing. I even have the student will be able to perform the correct foam rolling technique 80% of the time. Okay, so making sure that they're actually performing the exercises right. Modifications, like I said, you can use foam roller against the wall if the ground doesn't feel right. You can use tennis ball or cross ball. You can use a box or bench in order to push deeper into any areas of the connective tissue. Differentiation, using music during breathing. You could add a whiteboard or PowerPoint if needed to show the schedule. And you could use signals to coordinate proper breathing patterns with your hands for visual learners. Learning cues, breathing 360, stretching, scan and locate an area of tightness, self-myofascial release, roll on the muscles, not the bones. And then I have lesson plan procedures where I'm either going to have a picture or a diagram of what the students will be performing on the right. So from 0 to 5, we talk about self-myofascial release, what it is. I have some notes here. You can do whatever you want to your lesson plan that works best for you to save space. So that's what I did. I merged these two rows so they would connect, so it wasn't all in one side. Then we went over the glutes and hip rotators. So these would be the cues, and this is how I would teach the skill. And then I just go along through each foam rolling method. Here's the breathing assessment that we did for breathing. So I asked you if you were breathing through your mouth or nose. I asked you if you were exhaling through your mouth or nose, or inhaling through your mouth and nose. And then if you're using your chest or your stomach, okay? Then I also have some notes here. I didn't go over all these notes, but I have them at my disposal while I'm teaching. So I can talk about the benefits of breathing while I'm teaching. That way, I'm not just making things up as I go along. I have it planned out what I want to say, or I can look at my notes and say, oh, this looks interesting. Maybe I'll add that in today. Okay. Diaphragmatic breathing. I have a picture of the exercise. You can easily Google a lot of the images and just copy and paste them right in, especially with yoga poses. Very easy to find the poses and put the picture in. When it comes to the diagram of what you want your students to look like. So as it shows here, it says diagram or picture of activities. So I have myself here and my students kind of around me. I could also, let's see if I can add. Not sure I can get in here, but I could also put a diagram of how I want my students to look like in the class. So for example, a diagram for a yoga class is going to look like this. So I'll have the teacher here, and the S stands for student. And so my diagram on that right column might just be what the setting is going to look like. So you're letting me know what the setting will look like. Now, if you're teaching sports skills, your setting is probably going to change, right? Your diagrams are probably going to change. Where in a yoga class, the diagram or the scenario doesn't change. And in a sports skill setting, you might have one situation where you have students scattered, right? Then you might have one situation where you have all the students on one side of the court. Okay, so that diagram side on this right side is letting me know how is it going to look like in the gym. So when you look at your sheets and your lesson plan, like, okay, this is what I need to have cones here. I need to have this, and you can honestly draw a picture. Let's just say I'm creating stations. I have 4 stations here. I have a cone here, cone here. This is a relay station. Okay, maybe I have a jumping station here or a ladder station here. Okay, maybe I have a throwing station here against the wall. And then maybe I have a kicking station or a hockey station here with goalies and nets. Okay, and then I could take a picture of that, copy and paste that into this section here. That way you're letting whoever, like if you're going to present this lesson plan to someone, they could teach your lesson. So this is all to inform one, someone that may teach this lesson, but 2, it helps you when you go and teach your lesson, you know exactly what to do for each part of the lesson. Okay, so you'll be able to look at this. So here's an example here. This is what I mean. Teacher, all my students are in front of me. Teacher, even a little cue, walk around as I'm teaching. So maybe just some reminders of what you want to try to do as a teacher. And we'll go over the practicum guidelines next week on what you need to expect as far as what I'll be looking for. okay? So here's my stretching notes. I just copied and pasted those in. You can copy and paste all, like if you have all your materials online, you can copy and paste a lot of that in there, okay? Here's my mobility, the 90-90, Spider-Man stretch, hip adductor, the rib roll, T-spine rotations, ankle mobility, and then here's my assessment. So my cognitive questions, one, I could ask you, what are the benefits or effects of self-myofascial release? And I bet 80% of you in here could probably answer that because we've gone over this. What are the benefits of nostril breathing? Who remembers the benefits of nostril breathing? What's the first thing nostril breathing is, or what's one of the three?
Moisture.
Okay, increases moisture, which is what we want. We don't want dryness. Activates parasympathetic nervous system, which lowers our stress, heart rate, blood pressure. Really good for, what's that?
Keeps breath warm.
Yep, keeps it warm, and it cleans the air, disinfects the air. Okay. Really important to inhale through the nose. Okay. And so those would be some questions. These would be all the questions I could ask you after my lesson that would be in the cognitive domain. Okay. For the affective, I use anecdotal comments. So I could just write the student's name, quote unquote, Kendra and Larry. And then here's my yes or no or my assessment. Okay. Treats equipment and people with respect, listens and asks questions, good eye contact with teacher, encourages others, and has a positive attitude. Okay, yes or no. And this is just an example. Notes on character or leadership qualities as well. Anecdotal comments. Kendra, yes, she treats people with respect. Yes, she's a good listener. Yes, she encourages others. Say after class to put more equipment away. Okay, so I might write that down, understanding and noting that this person has high character, which is really important because we want to make sure that our students know that we're grading. We want them to know that we want them to have better character, right? And then also we want them to understand what they're learning. And then we also want them to be able to perform physically in psychomotor skills. So Larry, no, he didn't treat equipment and people respect. Threw his equipment on the ground because he was mad we were stretching again. Okay, verbally he said, I hate stretching. Okay, I need to work on positive feedback and talk to him after class. Okay, so those would just be some affective notes I could write in there. Okay, psychomotor assessments, that was the breathing assessments, and then also the foam rolling and self-myofascial release. Okay, I'm only gonna ask that you have your students partake in at least one of these assessments. So you should either be asking for understanding using the cognitive domain after the class. Maybe it's having them write journals and you're giving them journal prompts if it's a yoga class. That way you're not having them get out a piece of paper on their mat. Maybe it's, hey, after class, here are 5 journal prompt questions. List the 2 poses that we learned that had strictly to do with balance. Okay, name 2 poses that we learned that were hip stretches. We'll name 3 poses that we did that affected our shoulders. Okay, that would be 3 cognitive questions. And then you could use affective questions like, what did you value from today's activity? What can you take from it and do on your own? Okay, so that would be affective. And then psychomotor, were you able to perform the downward dog with your heels down? Were you able to get in a plank position without your hips falling down? Okay, you can provide a rubric and have them self-assess each other. If it's a yoga teacher training, yeah, you might get them in partners and have them split off and teach each other postures, because that's what we did in our yoga teacher training, right? So you might have them work in groups or work in small groups if you want. So you can kind of design this lesson however you want, whatever you think is going to be most interesting to you. Okay. So you can create your own assessments. We talked about that. We had some examples here that we did as a class, okay, where you just fill in the criteria. It could be a psychomotor skill, it could be affective, it could be cognitive. Okay, here's some examples of how to create assessments. So if you kind of are lost on assessments, this site right here will tell you how to create assessments. we have example assessments, so psychomotor assessments here, affective assessments, and cognitive assessments. So if you're looking for ideas. Teaching resources. So if you don't have any yoga teacher training manuals, I have 2 web sources for you to use. I have one from Open Phys Ed, which is an education-based yoga program. And you can get all the cues, all the information, all the pictures. I mean, obviously it looks like this would be some visual stuff that you could put around. Okay, you could print those out, you can put them up on the wall. Okay, those would be all visual. They have pictures of the yoga postures that you just add in. So you don't have to recreate the wheel, is what I'm trying to say. If you want to, that's totally fine. And I also have a yoga teacher training manual that you can have access to that goes over, again, all the different postures, the cues, the benefits, okay? So you can use that. If you're planning for sport or coaching, you'll click on the sport and coaching link. And I have basketball, dance, handball, floor hockey, flag football, soccer, track, ultimate, and volleyball. So we need Hayden to create a golf unit for us. Okay, but those are just examples of where you can get your information from. If you're planning for strength and conditioning, I have a strength and conditioning link. Okay, so this is adult strength and conditioning, all phases. So this would be something that you could follow or use. And this looks exactly like our training methods, right? We have day 1, day 2, day 3, roll, breathe, stretch, activation, mobility, active warm-up, med ball, plyo, core. And then here's the exercises and different slots. Okay, so you have a lot of different access to materials for teaching resources. Okay, if you're planning for physical education in general, PEcentral.org is probably the best site. This is where you're going to find any sports skill, fitness, yoga activity. This is kind of an all-around site for anybody. All right. Other than that, that's what all these links are here for, is to help you with your lesson plan. Okay. There is some more support systems for the learning domains. Okay, and they kind of give you examples of what verbs to use when you're talking about student learning outcomes. So example for psychomotor, okay, student will be able to combine a mature overhand throwing pattern with running. Okay, that would be psychomotor. You have cognitive. These are the verbs that you should use. So when I'm looking at your student learning outcomes and you're creating a cognitive learning outcome, you should use one of these words. So saying something like understand, how do we know they understand? Or the student will know the poses. What poses? You know, you have to be specific. So that, and then this kind of gets harder and harder. And what we're at here, level 6 creating, you're creating a lesson plan from remembering and understanding and applying all the things that you've learned, hopefully from your past as a yoga professional or your past as a trainer, and you're using those skills in this class to create a lesson plan. So this class does emphasize all learning domains, and you can see all those examples. Affective, okay, receive, respond, value, organize, internalize. These are the action verbs or the verbs used to write when you're using your student learning outcomes, and they have examples here for you. So that's what the Learning Domain Supplement Resources is online, okay? Everything else we've gone over, okay? I have my example lesson plan that I performed in class, and we'll go over unit plan and assignment next week along with your practicum expectations. The next week we'll go over practicum expectations. We'll talk about, you know, how you should prepare for your lesson a little bit more. And we'll also talk about how you're going to be graded during your practicum. We'll also get into unit plan, because what the unit plan is taking 3 lesson plans, and then you're going to have a scope and sequence of a unit. So after you create this lesson plan, you'll be creating 2 more lesson plans that kind of correlate with this one. So this could be day 1 of, phase 1. And then you could create day 2 and day 3 if it's strength and conditioning. If it's a yoga unit, like maybe you're looking at, power yoga unit, maybe you want to do core on one day, maybe you want to hit, shoulders and hips on another day, maybe on another day you want to do more spine and knee or ankle work. So you'll have to decide that on your own, the unit plans. I'll allow you to work on those unit plans together. That'll be fun. But we will go over more in depth the lesson plan expectations, unit plan expectations, practicum expectations last week, and that'll be our last lecture, okay? And honestly, lecturing is not my favorite thing to do, but I had to obviously go over all this because I'm sure you're gonna go to this link. If you didn't come to this lecture or watch this, then you're probably looking at this like, what is going on here, right? There's a lot of stuff here. It's really just to help you out because I want you to do your best.
So after the last lecture, did we not come here anymore?
Yeah, we will no longer come here after spring break. Okay, and in this class, what I like about this class the most is the fact that you all take over the class. And I get that it's very instructor led by me and it's very kind of more of a command style approach in the beginning of the semester. And it really is overload in the beginning of the semester. I'm kind of overloading with you with information because I know I don't have any more lectures with you. So that's why these lectures the past couple of weeks been, pretty in depth. I had to go over a lot of different things. So next week we'll talk about just the expectations, which should be pretty mellow compared to this lecture. And then we'll have a midterm on your student learning outcomes from each module. Okay, and we'll go over that as well next week. Okay. All right. Have a good day. We'll see you all later. Thanks for coming.
What?
Yep.